Okay, time to get started. My name is Jeff Murdler, and I'm the evil lawyer in the room. I'm a commercial real estate lawyer specializing in telecom and technology transactions, and I'm acting as a moderator today. The intended moderator had a family medical emergency last night and had to drop out, so here we are. So today's panel will be myself, Ryan Skane from HTS Engineering, and George Pate from GRC Solutions. So my background is as a commercial real estate lawyer, but I did my first technology deal in 1986, my first data center in 1990, and I spend about half my time doing general real estate and half doing data center, fiber, cellular, DAS, in-building wireless, energy related to real estate, all sorts of technology with an overlay on real estate, including data mining and energy related to that. With that, I'm going to ask my two fellow panelists to introduce themselves, Ryan and then George.
So hello, everyone. My name's Ryan Skeen. As Jeff mentioned, I'm the Director of Finance at HTS Engineering. Prior to joining HTS about a year ago, I had a 20-year career in various corporate banking roles, which makes me only slightly less evil than Jeff. For HTS, I perform a number of different corporate finance functions, and as it pertains to Bitcoin, I help with just general understanding of the space, as well as modeling project profitability for our customers.
Hi there, George Pate here, solutions architect for GRC over crypto. Main focus is trying to secure a product that we can get out there just in the crypto market. My background comes from engineering and security. I'd say I might be a little bit more evil than Jeff even, because I've done some auditing and whatnot on a higher level and had to work with guys like him before. So you've got the whole evil overlords here to take care of you today.
So I just want to remind everyone that we will be taking questions and answers at the end. You can submit questions throughout the webinar using the Q&A feature on Zoom, and then we'll take a bunch in the last 10 or 15 minutes. So I'm going to start off giving just a little high-level overview. Data centers in general, for those who aren't familiar with them, are extremely redundant, high-functioning facilities designed never to go down in most cases. There are different levels or tiers of data centers, going as high as tier 4. The higher the level of the data center, the greater the redundancy, the elimination of what's known as single points of failure, points that can bring down operations. The higher quality data centers use UPS and generators to provide 100% uptime of power and cooling. Typically, they're located near, but not necessarily right at, the customers or users. They can range in size from small facilities located in corporate headquarters to facilities that consume over 100 megawatts of power. Data centers are typically measured not by their square footage, but by the amount of available power. A 100 megawatt data center is enough to supply, uses enough power to supply about 80,000 homes, or a small city or a neighborhood in a large city, in one data center that's 100 megawatts or larger. They also consume millions of gallons of water, typically to cool the data center. If they're located in cooler environments further north or south, then they may have air cooling more of the time, but most data centers require a substantial amount of water. They use 50 to 100 times the energy and water of a typical office building. They typically use the grid as the primary source of power and UPS backup batteries and diesel generators so that they never go down. And their efficiency is measured by what's known as PUE, power usage efficiency. A typical non-brand new data center is probably 1.5 to 1, meaning in addition to whatever power it's using to operate the data center, it's using another 50% of that power to cool it and provide for general light and air for the building. 2% of the world's energy is consumed by data centers, and 80% of that is fueled by fossil fuels. So it's a significant generator of greenhouse gas emissions. Digital mining data centers generally are not high-level data centers, generally don't have those multiple levels of redundancy, and are generally located wherever the cheapest power is available. Common objections to both data centers in general and digital mining is the high inefficient power consumption, the use of water, the fact that they generally use unsustainable, non-renewable energy, although the industry is moving slowly towards lower power consumption, lower water consumption, and more sustainability. One of the things that we're witnessing now is digital mining at the forefront of, along with large hyperscale major cloud data centers, pushing the envelope to encourage development of new methodologies for operating sustainable data centers. One of the areas that's being tested now is what we're talking about today: liquid immersion cooling, putting the servers in a bath of a fluid, not water, that will remove the excess heat in a much more efficient manner than air-cooled data centers. With that, I'm going to turn the floor over to, I believe Ryan is next, talking about moving along in the topic of educating us on digital mining facilities.
That's right. So thanks, Jeff. We've got a diverse crowd in the audience today, various different backgrounds. So we did want to give a brief primer on digital assets, and more specifically Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining. Those of you that aren't familiar might get something out of this. Those of you that are very familiar might have plenty of nitpicks, and feel free to correct me or ask for additional clarification towards the end. Digital assets is a term that's come to replace the word cryptocurrency in the last couple of years, and for good reason. It's got a much more specific meaning legally. The Securities and Exchange Commission, for example, defines a digital asset as a digital representation of value issued and transferred using distributed ledger or blockchain technology. And of course, the digital asset market exists on the internet and is live at all times. So we can take a look right now and see that blockchain.com at least tracks 666 different digital assets trading globally, again, over the internet. And those assets have an aggregate value of $1.1 trillion. We can also see that Bitcoin is by far the largest, accounting for about a third of the overall market cap of the space. In addition to being simply the largest, Bitcoin is the oldest, meaning it was the first digital asset ever created. It's also the most decentralized, and upon completion of the Ethereum merge sometime, maybe in the next 30, 60 days, it will also be the largest digital asset based on a proof of work protocol, which is, of course, why we're here. So just briefly wanted to set the table on Bitcoin and how a Bitcoin transaction works in general, and how mining relates to that or plays a part in that. So if an individual wants to send a Bitcoin on the Bitcoin network to another individual, she would use her private key to sign a message stating that they want to send a certain amount of Bitcoins to a certain address. That message is then broadcast to the network. It's called a transaction. It's grouped with a number of other transactions into something called the block. And then different existing nodes on the network validate all the transactions in that block using the proof of work protocol, which at least as it pertains to Bitcoin is referred to as the mining process. The first miner to validate the block receives a reward, which is currently 6.25 Bitcoin per block. After the transaction is validated, it's disseminated to other nodes on the network. The block's added to the blockchain. All the transactions are processed, and the process is simply repeated for the next block. The mining process is actually a very simple one. It involves generating what's called a hash, which is just a number, but a number generated through the use of an algorithm that essentially compresses a bunch of different data. And that algorithm in the Bitcoin network is called SHA-256, which was developed, I believe, by the NSA in the late 80s, early 90s, and it is absolutely the standard for security and privacy applications across the internet. The hash value that's generated in the mining process combines the hash ID from the previous block, all of the data that's in the group of transactions that are included in the block, along with a random number called the nonce. And combine those three elements, run it through SHA-256, you generate a hash value. If that hash value is less than something called the target hash, which is just a number that's tracked across the Bitcoin network, then the block is verified and the miner wins a reward. If the hash value is not less than the target hash, that's fine. The process is simply repeated until that miner or any miner on the network does generate a successful hash. So what this process creates is essentially a race between all of the different miners on the network. And the winners of that race are the miners that can generate more hash in a shorter amount of time, and so must generate more compute, which all else equal means they consume more power. And again, all else equal means they require more cooling capacity in order to support them. As a result of this sort of race condition, you end up with something like this, which is a application-specific, purpose-built data center specific for the Bitcoin mining process. And I'll turn it back to Jeff now. He's going to talk about the regulatory environment as it pertains to these mines across America.
So there's been a lot of talk throughout the country and the world about the energy and environmental lack of sustainability of data centers in general and digital mining in particular. The opposition to digital mining has been strongest so far in New York. New York State Legislature, the Senate and the House both adopted a 2-year moratorium on mining using the proof of work process that Ryan described earlier a couple of years ago, but it was never signed by the governor, so it didn't go into effect. The goal of that was to require cryptocurrency mining transactions to be powered by renewable energy and not by fossil fuels, and to also require a full environmental impact statement for the construction of a new facility and pause permits for the renewal or expansion of existing facilities. Again, that was never signed into law and is still kicking around in the legislature in New York. In June of this year, the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation denied the renewal of an air permit for a natural gas powered digital mining facility in Seneca Lake, New York, finding that it was inconsistent with state policies on reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Also in the spring, the city of Plattsburgh, New York, was the first city in the US to, in the spring of 2018, was the first city in the US to ban cryptocurrency mining. They did it initially for a period of 18 months, but after 13 months, they lifted the ban in early 2019, and they're still deciding whether to renew it. In the interim, they established a tariff structure that they filed with the New York State Public Service Commission. So if Plattsburgh has to buy more electricity to power digital mining, the cost gets passed on to the actual miners. They've also established noise limits and requirements to recycle waste heat. That's the publicly known opposition that has taken specific enforcement steps in the US. There are a whole bunch of states that have enacted favorable tax benefits, either sales tax reduction, real estate tax abatements or reduction, electricity purchase pricing benefits. Those include Georgia, Illinois, Kentucky, Michigan, Montana, North Dakota, Iowa, Oklahoma, Texas, and Wyoming. So the opposition is out there. It's been very vocal, but it hasn't gotten very far in establishing regulations. But the expectation is that the tide may turn on that in the next few years. We'll have to wait and see. Mining companies, on the other hand, are trying to anticipate and address these concerns, some of them at least, as well as technology development companies, to avoid the establishment of this anti-mining legislation, such as, and something that large data center developer owner operators are doing the same kinds of things, exploring sustainable power. I've got one client that's building data centers that are powered by solar energy, a company called Aspen Creek Digital. I've worked with others that are doing hydroelectric, thermal electric, anaerobic digestion, other methods of generating sustainable, non-fossil fuel energy. Some of these facilities are looking at going off the grid and not taking energy from the electric grid, or going offline when their sustainable power is not able to be used. One of the critical factors in trying to make this work is developing battery storage so that the solar operates during the day. You can store power when it's generated during the day and continue to operate at night rather than having to go offline. They may also be able to put excess power back into the grid. There are other things being looked at, such as using flare gas generated when natural gas is mined and put into the network. The excess is burnt off. Well, maybe that could be used to power sustainable data centers or digital mining facilities. Also putting the excess heat generated by a data center or a mining facility back into the community, use it to heat hot water or generate heat for homes in that area. So efforts are being made, and a major one that we're going to talk about now is liquid immersion cooling and how that helps to move forward in sustainable power. With that, I'm going to turn it back to George.
Hi, Jeffrey. Thanks so much. So single immersion cooling is one of the reasons why you can go in to a tier 0 data center like a Bitcoin mine and cut out a lot of the fat, if you will. It operates with warm or chilled water. You get a reduction in server power, helping your overall PUE efficiency. you're required only 3% of the compute load for cooling. So it's a really beneficial technology to look at. And as Jeffrey was saying to some of his points, you can reuse a lot of the heat. It's compatible with any OEM server. There are some preparations to do before you immerse a server, but it's nothing that is too complicated to achieve. The electrosafe coolants are proven in the HPC world, and that's why we're using them now in the cryptocurrency world, as it's just a proven technology to efficiently displace the heat and efficiently utilize single-phase immersion cooling in data centers and for cryptocurrency mining. There's really no raised floors needed, no big infrastructure needed with it either. It's just a really simplified technology that can little to no risk for getting into it. We can move on to the next slide, and I'll speak a little bit on dual phase immersion as well, two-phase immersion, and how this operates. It operates in more of a sealed environment, where in single phase you more so have an open bath. It uses a different type of coolant that is a little bit more of a process to produce than the single phase immersion coolants. It still delivers a very good PUE and still is able to be very efficient in a data center. But it requires the coolant to be replenished every 2 years, as you do lose coolant from the coolant going through a more intensive process to cool the coolant before coming back into the bath, if you will. It's got very efficient water usage, but there's also reasons why single phase immersion would be used over two phases. We can stay away from even having water on site and go to dry coolers, adiabatic cooler setups. If we could go to the next slide, please. Just to kind of, before we go into this, you know, it's really cool to see how single phase aligns with a tier 0 data center approach with cryptocurrency mining. That's your main bread and butter. How fast can you scale up and how fast can you get your miners going? And unlike other high performance computing, these miners can be turned on and off very easily. So they are able to be utilized in a single phase immersion to two phase immersion. I'd say in a quicker form, you can assimilate a lot faster using single phase. Your benefits for single phase immersion are just out of this world when you try to compare the two. My main argument is that you never really lose coolant with single phase. If you follow the proper protocols and proper steps for using single phase immersion cooling, even though it isn't an open bath, this fluid never changes state. So there's little to no risk for the coolant ever evaporating. Whereas in the two-phase immersion cooling, like I said, it goes through this really intricate cooling process to where you lose some of your coolant over time, and so you will have to refill. With single phase, you're also able to.
Correct me if I'm wrong, is that two-phase immersion cooling has great potential, but it really isn't ready for prime time yet out in the market in operational usage.
I would agree with you with that, Jeffrey. There are cases in the market where two-phase immersion cooling is proven and working, but to get it to scale for our conversation today, which is related to cryptocurrency mining, I believe single-phase immersion would be the way to go with this project. It just doesn't seem like we can scale up with two-phase as fast, and just doesn't seem like it's ready to be scaled up in general. But it's a technology that we can definitely step to later. Thank you for that, Jeffrey. speaking to that, with single phase immersion, we're able to get a little bit more stable overclocking because of the way that the heat rejection works. So with the open bath coolant, and that you never lose the state of the coolant, and it always remains in this fluid, we're able to get a more stable overclocking environment with a single phase immersion. And then you're able to realize your immediate savings with that as well. You're able to hash harder, and you're able to get more blocks broken, and able to get more Satoshis. Let's move on to the next one, if you will, please. The sustainability is the main part that I like about single phase immersion. And to kind of speak to a few of the data center guys in the audience, it cuts down your mean time to failure, which also helps with your mean time to repair. That helps your overall uptime when you're trying to stay up, so you can maintain your SLAs and maintain everything as you need to. And then if you cut out all that fat and think about it, you're able to hash more, and you're able to keep your miners making you money. The carbon footprint gets cut because we're able to, as Jeffrey was saying, there's a lot of different ways that they're trying to think of utilizing this heat from the single phase immersion. And instead of just putting it through a dry cooler, maybe we can cool ponds, maybe we can do some other things, but just a single phase immersion alone already cut your carbon footprint by 40%. And then you can keep adding on from there, just depending how your infrastructure plan goes. We try to save the water by not going with evaporative cooling towers any longer, as that's one of the things you see in two-phase immersion a lot, is some evaporative cooling towers, which you do have to have makeup water for that. We're able to cut a lot of that out, and not align with that any longer in order to go green. As I was already speaking about, the reuse and the repurpose of the rejected heat, there's just so many projects out there, from heating homes, from heating boilers and industrial environments, to heating pools, that can be done. And the reduced e-waste goes to the mean time to failure and mean time to repair. In immersion, you don't have to have fans. So we can cut out the need for any type of fans in the immersion tanks. We can also cut out the need for any type of specialized heat sink that would be for air cooling, because liquid cooling does need a heat sink, but you do not need to have a specialized Zalman just for air heat sink. You're displacing the heat into the tanks. So let's move on, please. So we've got a 40% reduce in footprint, like we've talked about before. And what that means is your actual footprint within your data centers. By taking everything into liquid immersion and utilizing tanks, we're able to actually increase our what we can fit into one data center. We can decrease the need for giant racks and a lot of unnecessary things that are in the data center world now due to liquid immersion. When you walk in, you're able to actually hear yourself think, rather than have a bunch of fans running and keeping you from even speaking to the next person in the room. Increases your location option as well. And in cryptocurrency, that's a big thing because you're able to stay truly decentralized. Being that if you model your business in containers, you're able to move your containers to where the electricity may be more flexible in pricing. And then you're decreasing a lot of the construction costs. A Bitcoin mine is a tier 0 data center, meaning we don't need a lot of what the normal data centers would call for. And that immediately helps you decrease a lot of your deployment times to scale up as quickly as possible. Let's go ahead and move on to the next one. And I'll speak a little bit on overclocking. What overclocking is we are pushing the CPU to do more computations in order to hash more. And Ryan, if you wouldn't mind stepping in with me and speaking a little bit more on overclocking and kind of helping me describe the curve, that would be amazing.
Yeah, no problem, George. So overclocking certainly been a bit of a buzzword in Bitcoin mining space. I mean, for some time, but we're hearing it a lot more over the last year, especially. And so we want to make sure we understand its implications fully for our customers, and in particular, how it impacts the profitability of their mining operations. And I'm trying to move to the next slide. There it is. One thing we've done is we've done some testing on overclocking and how it impacts the hash rate efficiency of miners. And what we found is there is significant degradation in that efficiency. So the more you overclock the miner, the more power it consumes, and the less hash it is able to generate per unit of energy that it does consume. So this is actually a negative. Yeah, go ahead.
Are you saying, Ryan, that there's a sweet spot in the middle per se, and that not just overclocking all the way is a good thing?
So the answer is it depends, and we look at it on a project-specific basis. But in general, we do find yes, and that's a question we're always looking to answer is, is more overclocking necessarily better? And at what point do we sort of hit a tipping point where the disadvantages sort of overwhelm the benefits? So we do a lot of modeling in this respect, and I was actually going to jump to our live model to walk through an example with everyone. So one way in which we'll model some scenarios for our customers is we'll consider a standardized project. In this instance, it's a 40 megawatt Bitcoin mine that is using the Antminer S19J Pro as its sole miner. And then we'll compare different approaches to cooling and overclocking in that mining setup. So you can see across the top here, there's 40 megawatts of power for each scenario we're comparing. In the first column, we're comparing fans with, in the remaining columns, liquid immersion cooling at increasing levels of overclocking. Where we designate here, overclocking is increasing the clock speed, but it also means you're using more power per miner. Standard spec power consumption for a Bitcoin miner is about 3 kilowatts. We also compare 4, 5, 6, and 8 kilowatts at the limit here. The first thing you notice when you compare these approaches is what George referenced. A lot more of the power available for the mine is available for the miners themselves. And that's because of the dramatic decrease in the PUE that comes with immersion cooling versus using fans. And that results in, when we're comparing fans with liquid immersion cooling and no overclocking, significant increase in the hash rate the mine's able to generate, again, because there's more power available to generate hash. Somewhat counterintuitively for some, as we increase the overclocking for the mine as a whole, we're actually reducing the amount of hash that the mine can produce. Again, we've got a fixed amount of power, and we're increasing the amount of power that an individual miner consumes. And so the number of miners that the mine can support will decline as you increase the overclocking. So if you're generating lower hash, you're actually generating fewer Bitcoin, and all else equal, less profit in your mine. Now, that's offset, of course, by the fact that you have to purchase fewer miners. So your upfront capital costs are a lot less, all else considered, the more that you overclock. So you have to weigh those factors as well as a number of others. I can mention, for example, we keep track of the footprint of the different approaches and how that would impact cost to build all of the infrastructure, including the general construction costs of the facility, property taxes, a couple of other factors. we compare all of those things using a return on investment. That's really obviously the most optimal way, the best way to find the optimal solution to all of these different trade-offs. And what we typically find, as George mentioned, is that overclocking in the 33% to 66% of the spec processing speed or power consumption tends to be the optimal approach for generating the most profitable mine. And we see that in that approach having a lower total cost per unit, per hash unit that's created, and also in the block economics. So those two approaches tend to generate more net cash flow per block over the life of a project. Now, that doesn't mean that overclocking all the way up to 8 kilowatts is necessarily never a good thing. One thing George and I like to discuss with our customers is a dynamic approach to overclocking, where you think of those higher levels of overclocking as almost spare capacity that's there to allow you to take advantage of the beneficial changes in the pricing environment. So if there's a big spike in the price of Bitcoin, you know, a new player into the space, it might be 18 months from the initial design phase, construction, installation of your miners, powering everything on. It might be 18 months to complete that whole process, and you might have missed a significant opportunity in terms of being able to earn more Bitcoin. If you have spare capacity available in overclocking, it might be 2 or 3 months to order in and install maybe some of the additional cooling infrastructure you might need, piping, coolers, etc. You might have your mine already prepared with that excess cooling infrastructure available, and you can switch on greater overclocking immediately and start generating more profit, earning more Bitcoin much sooner than other people in the market. So that's how we think about overclocking. Obviously, it depends on specific projects and a number of the different factors that come into play. It also depends, obviously, on the immersion cooling product that you're using to achieve this overclocking, and that's when I can turn it back to George as he wants to discuss GRC's latest Bitcoin miner product.
Yes, thank you, Ryan. Thank you. So taking all of that into accountability and thinking about that, we've decided to make a product that can be adaptable and modular for these environments, because it seems like a lot of our mines are becoming modular. They need to be able to be taken down and moved depending on what's happening in the environments, what's happening with the governments. And so we've tried to make a product that has the ability to fit into that infrastructure and be a viable piece of that infrastructure. So I'd like to introduce the Hashrack Max. This is our product that solely is to be used for cryptocurrency mining, as we do have other products that will work with high performance computing and cryptocurrency mining, whereas this one is designed just to work with ASIC units specifically. Let's go ahead and on to the next slide, please. As I was saying, it's designed exclusively for crypto mining. Next generation immersion cooling system that can take extreme heat loads, because in crypto, we're seeing the highest heat we've ever seen before, let it be from high performance computing or any type of realm. The Hashrack Max is designed to take those high heat loads and be able to process that and give you a product that will deliver everything that you need for your environment, whether it be overclocking, underclocking, or any type of liquid immersion crypto mining situation. We've designed it to support up to 48-bit main S19 miners. It's got a very minimal infrastructure cost. As you see, we've kind of taken a Toyota approach to it and cut out a lot of the fat to give a product that just gives you what you need. Not to say that this isn't a quality product, because every part of it is quality, but we've taken a lot of the bells and whistles out that a Ferrari would have. And we're just trying to stay with the Toyota approach to try to make a product that lasts very long for our customers and something that we can support. It's got very low supplemental expenses, as we've been in the industry for quite a while in the high performance computing realm. And luckily my team has the knowledge to be able to create something like this, this system that we have here. We can have custom designed PDUs to match the cryptocurrency mining power needs. If you're needing to go 4 kilowatt, 6 kilowatt, 8 kilowatt miners, we can definitely fit your needs to be able to accommodate for you. Mind you, you will have to mold the proper heat rejection system for that, as Ryan was speaking about. Is the more you overclock, the bigger the heat rejection system becomes. But you can also decrease the number of miners in the tank if you do not have the proper heat rejection system. You'll be able to hash harder. You might not make as many Satoshis from mining, but you would be able to hopefully break more blocks by being able to overclock. And that's something that we're still looking into. Go ahead into the next slide. So it's very budget friendly. It's really built for the sustainability of your business. As I said, we've taken an approach to try to cut out a lot of the unneeded features that are seen in tiered up data centers. As we know, Bitcoin cryptocurrency mining is a tier 0 approach. So we really don't need a lot of the higher end features that are used with high performance computing and whatnot. Not to say that they could be used, but there's really no need for it logically. We're able to support a super high density of miners. You can have a location flexibility of putting wherever you want in your building. It has a very friendly footprint to a building, and we'd love to speak with you about how we can put it in your building to get it up. It's very easy to use and easy to adopt to use, I would say. Is liquid immersion scares a lot of people because you're doing something that's unethical. We're taught not to dunk miners and not to dunk things in liquid, but it is a system specifically designed for it, absolutely safe for the systems, and it's engineered to be able to withstand a pretty high heat load to be sustainable for you. You're going to maximize your overall ROI by being able to decrease cost on the overhead and increase your computing power by utilizing the technology that we've had in the previous high performance computing realm. You're able to reduce and utilize a lot of your heat that would whereas be wasted before. It's very energy efficient. We obviously support overclocking, so we'd love to get into discussions with you about how we can see to fit this need for your overclocking needs. We can also adapt warm or chilled water to it if you do not want to choose to use an adiabatic dry cooler. So it is flexible to be able to be used with water cooling towers. Deploys quickly and anywhere. Like you could deploy it in the middle of a desert if you really wanted to. We've seen some pretty cool deployments. Let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. So we've doubled the capacity racks from our previous designs to fit more miners. We've got a high performance cooling distribution unit and pump that allows for constant fluid flow between the unit, allowing you to have a even cooling around the unit. We've integrated the power distribution units and switches with power cords and cable management into the units. The switches are actually immersed in the very back of the units. So you do not have to worry about replacing switches as well in in your Bitcoin cryptocurrency mining data center using the Hashrack Max. That seems to be a big issue for a lot of people, is hot switches outside the liquid immersion, and then your switches die and you can't mine anymore. So we've thought of that, and we've been able to engineer that into this product. We've got system monitoring for the cooling pressure, temperatures, and levels. And we've got a 90-day limited warranty against any defects in the material or workmanship. So we will stand behind our product to assure that you can get a product that we're proud of and you're proud of. And let's go ahead into the Q&A. So here's Jeffrey and Ryan again. Thank you very much, everyone, for being a part of this and being able to hear us speak about our product.
Time for questions. Most of the questions so far have been, that are in the Q&A chat box, are pretty technical, so I'm going to defer to George to answer a lot of them. But please encourage everyone to submit additional questions, and I'll just kind of jump around in the questions that have been asked, since a lot the ones there tend to come from the same people. So first one was, is there an optimum fluid flow velocity across chips to maximize the cooling?
Thank you, Jeffrey. Yes, I see that question's from Robert Hefner. Yes, there is a solution for that developed within the system. I'd love to get in a meeting with you so I can go a little bit more into detail about that.
Next one from Philip Ayazi. How did these dielectric fluids interact with the thermal interface material on the computer chip? My assumption is they don't interact, and that's the whole point.
Yeah, so Philip, there is a immersion preparation process that has to be gone through in order to remove some of that from the miners. And if you would like to make a meeting, we can definitely go through that and see what we can do to help you out.
Next one, and I'm just trying to jump and take one question from each person who's asked before we go back, time permitting. Jonathan White asked, are the Hashrack Max designed for modular CCAN configurations?
Is that asking basically if it can be put in a container? And I will say that we are working on that. Containerized designs are definitely something we like to do, and we'd love to talk more with you about that.
Jordan Johnson asked, what's the approximate cost per megawatt for the Hashrack?
Cost per megawatt for the Hashrack, I can't give out any solid numbers, unfortunately, but I would love to get in an individual meeting with you and be able to give you some budgetary numbers that you can use going forward.
Part of the problem, obviously, folks, is that every system installation is different, and without George knowing more about the specific installation, it's hard to quote specific statistics or costs. Alejandro Mendez, do we do projects outside the US, such as in Latin America?
We are global. We work everywhere around the US. We have projects in Latin America. We have projects in India, and we would love to be able to assist you in Latin America.
So I think
I see one in the comments. Russell Neal recommended ambient temperatures for the Hashrack setup. What's cool about that is you don't really need to worry about ambient temperatures. Now, of course, if you're going to have people working in that environment, going in and out of it, then you may need to have some type of HVAC setup. But the Hashrack Max could run in a warehouse environment or in a Quonset hut type environment like we've seen before for cryptocurrency mining.
I'm just going back to take some earlier questions from people who we already took one question from. How much water is required in what unit, gallons? And my assumption as an ignorant, non-technical guy is pretty little. That's the whole point, avoiding the water usage.
Yes, so Robert, it really depends on what heat rejection system you'll be using. So if you're using evaporative cooling towers, then we will require water. If we go with the adiabatic dry cooler setup with cooling pads, we're able to avoid a makeup water on site situation.
Jordan Johnson asked, what's the current uses for large scale heat reuse? I think that's really up to the imagination, but I think hot water heating and winter facility building heating are the two most common that I've seen in facilities I've worked on. George, Ryan, have you seen other uses for? I actually also saw one where there was a residential complex with a swimming pool, and they used the waste heat to heat the swimming pool.
Yes, I've seen that as well. I've seen it implemented in agriculture. I've been able to see a lot of really neat implements of how to reuse this heat. Aquaponics, various other agriculture realms. But I've also seen it, like Jeffrey said, to heat pool water. I've seen a project come up where they're going to be using it for industrial boilers to help reuse that heat to cut down boiler cost in industrial environments.
Another question that's in the chat as opposed to in the Q&A from Chuck Watson was, what's the actual or prospective tenant makeup for the immersion cooling centers? I think that's let the imagination go as far as it can and service anybody, any use, not just digital mining, but it would operate for traditional data centers, any kind of facility.
Correct, Jeffrey. Yes, I believe it really allows you to get a creative right now with your data center usage. I see one from Robert Hefner about overclocking. Is there an actual sweet spot? It depends on your mine and how you want to run your mine. If you're going to swing overclocking as when you have excess power, or if you're going to try to run overclocking all the time. So there's multiple variables that go into that.
Russell Neal asked, what types of maintenance sequences should we be prepared for the units? Cleaning, flushing, refilling, hardware changeouts. How hard is it for someone with little immersion cooling knowledge to do that?
Yeah, to speak to that a little bit, the maintenance sequences, like I was saying before, your mean time to failure and your mean time to replace will go down. But you will still have to do some types of cleanings. The fluid goes through a filter that we have designed on the HashRack Max unit, so we can clean the filters with ease. So if you've ever done any type of auto mechanic work or even changed your own oil, it's very similar, except the fluid isn't as hot as if you change your own oil. So it's very easy for someone with little immersion cooling knowledge to get into this. I like to say that it's glorified plumbing.
Jonathan White asked, are there solar energy storage solutions that support the draw for miners, and are the costs prohibitive? So I'm actually working on, I think, about 15 battery storage facilities right now. And some of them involve storing solar energy for use at night. It's definitely doable. Again, the cost is hard to project because it depends where you are in the country and what the local pricing is for equipment installation and available land. George, Ryan, you have anything to add on that?
Go ahead, George.
Yeah, so I'm seeing, yes, there is support for it. I'm more so seeing that we're seeing synergistic relationships between multiple renewables, and not just multiple renewables, but older technologies as well, to be able to bridge this gap to get to a fully renewable grid, if that is the case. And crypto mining is, if you will, incentivizing that, and immersion cooling incentivizes that, as it's going to help you ROI your project a lot faster.
Luciano Marçal asked, what's the compatibility on different fluids for the hash rack due to the cost and complications of shipping? Seems like it's more convenient to ship just the hash rack and buy the fluid locally.
Yeah, so Luciano, we actually have a global supply chain for the fluid that we use, but if you would, we're agnostic to what type of fluid you use, but we could not support after that if you choose to use another fluid that we aren't partnered with, if you will. But we do have a global supply chain set up in order to get you a reasonably priced fluid for your solution. So whether you're in Latin America, Asia, wherever it may be, we can definitely get you the fluids you need.
All right.
Awesome.
I want to thank everyone. I want to thank GRC for inviting me to participate today. Great working with the entire team. And I'll turn it over to George for a little closing comment.
Yes, Robert, we do manufacture the controller system. We do a lot of it on our own side. And so let's get in a meeting and talk about that. But thank y'all all so much for being a part of this today. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Jeffrey. Thank you for all the attendees that came in and registered. And thank you for all the wonderful questions. Please contact me if you have any other questions. Visit grcooling.com/LICAM to view all of our Liquid Cooling Awareness Month webinars on demand and register for our September webinar on transitioning to immersion cooling. Thank y'all so much.